Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome back to another forecast discussion from here in the National Weather Service in Columbia. This is Matt. I'll be running through kind of our Memorial Day weekend forecast here, and it is unfortunately going to continue our stretch of miserable weekends here in the Midlands and CSRA of South Carolina. The vast majority of weekends so far in 2023 have had some sort of rain, and this one will probably be the wettest and most miserable of them all, at least relative to what we should have for a typical Memorial Day weekend here. So, just taking a look at the visible satellite across the country right now, we see across the off the Atlantic coast, we have our kind of blob of clouds and a developing low pressure system that's going to be our main weekend weather maker. We have a couple mesoscale convective systems that are lingering from overnight convection across the central U.S. There was a flash flood emergency for kind of southwest Nebraska this morning in some areas that needed rain but did not need that much rain so quickly. Just take a look at the mosaic radar across the country. You can see our area for where our flash flood was out in Nebraska, another MCS kind of coming down through West Texas, and then our developing low pressure system off the Atlantic coast that's starting to kind of generate some spin to it, as you can see there. Currently, the center of the low is kind of off the Florida coast, and it's going to continue up for the next few days. So, speaking of that low, let's take a look at what NHC, as of 7:45 this morning, is talking about. And right now, this low pressure has a 10% chance of becoming a tropical cyclone in the next 48 hours. It's the same thing if you go out through 5 days. So, low chance. It's been there since the beginning. For the chance of this actually becoming tropical or subtropical is pretty low. We'll talk a little bit about why down here in the discussion. The reasoning is basically it's a frontal system. So it's a low pressure that's kind of generating off of a front. And because of that, it's just not really going to become an actual tropical system. That being said, it will have a few kind of tropical characteristics, but in general, not likely to be named unless something dramatically changes. And it really won't change the impacts, whether it gets named or not for us. We'll talk a little bit about the impacts we're thinking exactly, but as of right now, kind of jump over to just the forecast office page here for Columbia. We have a lake wind advisory out for the next couple days, and the Charleston office has one out for Lake Moultrie down there. And our thinking is just going to be windy as this low comes on shore. We'll talk a little bit more why. That's the only product we have out right now. It's possible we could be having some flash flood products or just flood products in general come out as we start to see this rain. But for now, just a lake wind advisory, expecting gusts, 30 to 35 miles an hour. So let's take a look at what the Weather Prediction Center has for their kind of frontal forecast map here. It's a nice little map to give you a sense of what's happening. Again, we have our low off the basically the Georgia coast at this point, and then over the next couple days, that low is going to move to the north and then kind of to the northwest, come on shore somewhere in kind of north central South Carolina, and produce a big shield of precip across most of South Carolina into eastern Georgia. Take a look at their excessive rain outlook here. Day one, just from that rain we saw kind of right off the coast as that low starts to generate, we have a kind of just a marginal risk of flash flooding for eastern parts of our forecast area into the coastal plain. We go to day two, is where we really see the big change. We have an area of moderate risk for flash flooding, which is a 40% or higher, and then a slight risk that extends through the Midlands and northern Midlands of South Carolina, including Columbia, Charlotte, and then a marginal risk that includes the Augusta and CSRA areas. So expecting quite a bit of rain tomorrow. We'll talk a little bit more about that why, but here is the current WPC forecast map for total amounts of rain. You can see today, expecting most of that rain, this is through 12Z or 8 a.m. tomorrow, to remain kind of to the east of the Columbia area and Augusta's areas. And then tomorrow, that rain moves right over top of the Midlands and into the upstate, and we see a big increase in rainfall tomorrow, and then it kind of lingers around a little bit into Sunday. So look at the totals here. WPC's got their forecast, pretty much for most of the Midlands and really most of South Carolina in general, is that 1.5 to 2.5 inches or so of rain. We'll see kind of a local maxima in rain up into the mountains of North Carolina as you get that upslope flow. So that wind's coming from the east riding up the mountains, generating a bit more rain. Right now, that confidence has increased a bit over the last 24 hours about this rainfall total. So let's take a look at some forecast products here. So we'll go to, first we'll take a look at we'll start with the GFS here. And let's go to get let's look at sea level, pressure, and precipitation. So this is the 3-hour forecast from the GFS. We'll run through this. You can see our isobars tending to cut off there, indicating we have kind of a centralized area of low pressure. This is as of 6Z Saturday, so about 2 a.m. Friday night into Saturday morning. See that rainfall really starting to move on shore. That low is still sitting off the coast, but really producing this big broad shield of precip that will then just sort of move across all of South Carolina, and then the low eventually will move on shore late Saturday night into Sunday morning. And there's a couple interesting things to look at here to start. We'll start with our surface temperature. We can see the frontal boundary that NHC was talking about where this low pressure is forming off of and why this really won't be a tropical storm. You can see here right off the coast we have a pretty strong temperature gradient, going from the 60s to the mid to upper 70s. So this is going to be the area that allows that low pressure to form, or baroclinic instability that allows that to form. And then as that pressure system forms, that temperature gradient is going to tighten up even further and then move on shore. And kind of giving a little bit of a spoiler here, but if you notice, those temperatures across South Carolina Saturday afternoon are remarkably cool for this time of year, talking 30 to 40 degrees below average. So we're seeing temperatures here, in the upper 40s into the upstate, down into Columbia for Friday afternoon. Now, this is just one model run, but it is a pretty consistent signal, and we'll talk a little bit more about why when we look at the high-res stuff, that we're going to see this kind of blob of cold air develop throughout Saturday afternoon. Temperatures will actually drop throughout most of the day as that low comes on shore. So, well, let's just cut to it. So, go to the dew point temperatures from, again, this is just one model run, but it gives a good picture of what we're thinking is going to happen. See our dew points dropping this afternoon down to around 40 into the upper 30s throughout most of the area. And then as we get into Saturday, see those dew points drop even further as we get that wedge of cold air that develops ahead of this low and drives that denser, drier air down the eastern spine of the Appalachians. And then by Saturday afternoon, we see our dew points jump up. So what's happening there is that precip shield is overrunning all that drier air. And we're actually cooling off quite a bit. And we can use something called wet bulb temperature, which basically tells if you take the air at a certain temperature and a certain dew point and you saturate it, with rain or whatever, what will it cool to? So we can see as that dry air kind of pools down early Saturday morning, and then we get that rain that comes over top, that wet bulb temperature drops down into the 40s, which is what we're seeing when we look at the temperature map here. Okay, so then let's just look at another model here for see how things compare. Let's just take a look at what the NAM has for temperatures at, this is 15Z, so 11 a.m. on Saturday. Okay, so the temperatures there are quite a bit different than the GFS. We saw we were down a bit cooler in the GFS. We're a bit warmer here. We're actually in the upper 50s. But let's see how this kind of progresses over time. We start the day, this is about midnight here, and we're in the upper 50s. And then as that low kind of moves closer to the shore, we actually stay kind of into the mid 50s. And then by the afternoon, we see that temperature starting to crash down to around 50. So GFS is a bit cooler with the solution, probably likely due to the amount of precip it has. Let's take a look at that. You see the NAM here brings that precip on shore a little bit later, that big slug of heaviest rain a little bit later than what the GFS has. So that kind of explains why it's a bit warmer throughout the day, because it doesn't have as much rain. let's see, just straight comparing it here. So this is 18Z Saturday, GFS. It's got rain all the way into the upstate. Click back to the NAM. It doesn't have rain in the upstate. So mainly a precip depiction thing here as to why the temperatures are so different. So there is a bit of disagreement still over the timing, which then the timing impacts things like temperature. We take a look at the EC has. The EC has something kind of similar to what the GFS was showing, maybe kind of in between the two, where it has those temperatures dropping down. Has the precip up into the upstate. I'm going to guess that the temperatures are going to look something more similar to what the NAM has. And yeah, you kind of see that. Temperatures stay in the 50s actually, because it doesn't bring a whole ton of precip kind of back into the upstate until later, and then the temperatures kind of drop off then. Take a look at what the HER has. The HER, this is the 12Z run. Brings that low onshore later. It has that kind of blob of cold air developing in the afternoon and late morning down to around 50. See the precip here. It's got simulated reflectivity. So yeah, the HER has this nice blob of kind of broad shield of precip developing throughout the morning, kind of moving into the Columbia I-20 corridor by about 7 to 8 a.m. And then it's just there pretty much all day. This is now 8 p.m. and there's still rain, down in the Augusta area up through Columbia. So that's a pretty consistent kind of signal we've seen throughout the high-res stuff. So let's actually jump over to that now. This is the SPC's HREF page. So this takes all the high-res ensemble forecasts and puts them together. We'll take a look first at we'll take a look at the 500 millibar height map. Kind of see why we're seeing this feature develop. We have this cutoff low at 500 millibars here, kind of over southern Georgia and northern Florida, and that is kind of part of a Rex block pattern, which is where you have a big high pressure beneath a low pressure, or high pressure above a low pressure system. Forces the jet stream well to the north, and it's called a blocking pattern because the pattern doesn't break down very fast. It blocks the flow and really prevents anything from changing all that much on a day-to-day basis. So we're going to stick with that high or upper level cutoff low over top of us really for the next few days. We'll show that again here in a minute. But again, this upper level low is kind of the main feature that's helping start this system. We go down and take a look at our precip here. Let's take a look at threshold prob. So this is basically like a probability of precip based on this model. So we see by 0Z tonight, so about 8 p.m., expecting some of those showers moving on shore. And then this is, again, an ensemble mean, so this takes together the whole ensemble. And then by about 8 a.m. tomorrow, like we saw in the HER, we have this big precip shield developing across most of South Carolina and then developing and moving across most of the state throughout the day. So pretty consistent across the high-res in what we're going to see with this type of setup here. The high-res stuff might do pretty well considering we have that. Take a look here at our temperatures. We have that wedge of high pressure developing, or cold air damming, that's developing down the eastern side of the Appalachians. As that precip moves on shore, we see those temperatures drop kind of lee of those mountains, and we have that strong northeasterly winds. And high-res models tend to do decently well in situations like this. So take a look here, 18Z tomorrow afternoon. This is the ensemble mean from the temperatures. There's strong northerly winds, and temperatures kind of plummet across South Carolina as that wave of precip moves over, saturates that dry air and drops the temperatures well down, into the low 50s, maybe even the upper 40s. So again, you can see here these wind barbs are showing the wind speeds we're expecting, and in this case, we're seeing about 15 knots from the north, and that's at 10 meters, but it's going to be breezy. Gusts, sustained winds 15 to 20 miles an hour, and gusts over 30. Take a look at another little thing to talk about the winds a little bit more. Take a look at the 10 meter above ground gusts here. And again, this is an ensemble mean. We see those winds stay very strong offshore throughout the day today, and then by this evening, as that low starts to move closer and we start to see that cold air damming develop more, get a pretty strong pressure gradient between the coastal low and that surface high, and those winds move onshore, and we start to see, pretty strong winds here throughout the day with 10-meter gusts, up around 40 miles an hour. This tends to be a little overdone. The high-risk stuff gets a little aggressive with how it forecasts wind gusts, and especially this is 10 meters, so you're 30 plus feet off the ground. Not all of that is actually making it to the surface exactly, at least where we measure it. You take a look at the ensemble minimum, which tends to be a somewhat better representation of what we may actually see for those gusts. But still, even with the ensemble minimum, we're seeing those 30 plus mile an hour gusts throughout most of the afternoon tomorrow. So hence the lake wind advisory. So tomorrow is going to be quite the miserable day and continue our poor luck with weekends here in South Carolina and the CSRA. Again, rain showers going to be moving in kind of early tomorrow morning and there throughout the day, temperatures falling. So let's move on to kind of the rest of the weekend and see if there's any saving light. We'll just zoom out here a little bit more. Kind of show us a bigger picture of the U.S. and what that pattern is going to look like. So we'll go to our 500 millibar wind speed. See here, we were talking about that Rex block developing. We have our cutoff low over kind of the deep south and a big high to the north of that. So it's a blocking pattern. You see this jet stream is forced well north, up over the Hudson Bay in Canada. So we don't really have any flow to move this system out of the way. So over the next few days, that cutoff low is just going to sit over top of us. And this is now basically midnight, Sunday into Monday. This is Monday during the day. And then finally Tuesday, does that low actually move off the coast and we kind of get the pattern to break down finally. So we're going to be dealing with this upper low overhead for the next few days. And because of that, our precip chances are going to continue to linger around. Saturday is going to be the washout day. Sunday, though, still going to be some showers around. We have that upper low, so our lapse rates aloft are going to be pretty steep. We could actually have some little convective showers and stuff that develop in the afternoon. Definitely less of a washout than we saw on Saturday, thankfully. And then kind of the same thing for Monday. It's not really a washout day, but we are going to see these kind of popcorn showers and stuff like that developing pretty much across the area Sunday and Monday. So unfortunately, not the best Memorial Day weekend we've ever seen. So it is what it is. The weather does not cooperate with weekends around here, nor should we expect it to. And let's take a look at the precipitable water. So it just shows you about the amount of moisture that's in the atmosphere. And you'll see, on Saturday we have that tongue of moisture moving in as that low moves onshore. And then, on Sunday we do get a little bit of dry air that wraps in. So there could be kind of a lull in the afternoon for overall convection and rain chances. But then by the time we get to Monday again, moisture kind of fills in. So Sunday afternoon, potentially the best of the days this weekend. See, the Euro here has kind of a similar idea where we get a little bit of that tongue of dry air wrapping back in by late Sunday. Let's take a look at the sounding right here. Yeah, so we take a look at the sounding. This doesn't scream like it's going to be a ton of precip to me. We got a bit of dry air from 700 to 300 millibars. Lapse rates are pretty weak at low levels. Really no cape. And unless there's something forcing aloft, this really isn't a huge rain sounding, I would expect. So might get lucky on Sunday afternoon, but it's still, there's going to be precip chances around, unfortunately. And we'll take a look at the GFS simulated reflectivity here because I'm curious as to how it's showing that dry air. Yeah, so we don't really see much across our area Sunday afternoon in terms of precip. And then we see it kind of develop back again Monday. And again, that's due to that dry air aloft. Let's take a look at that NAM, see if it's got a similar solution. That dry air kind of wrapping in. So we see our system move out early Sunday morning. This is about 8 a.m. Sunday morning. And then we actually do have that lull again there on Sunday before precip. Well, the NAM doesn't have as much precip chances on Monday, at least through the early afternoon. So And take a look at the euro. Yeah, so again, it's got the rain moving out kind of early morning to late morning on Sunday, and then it's pretty much a dry forecast in the afternoon from the euro. So, and then again, stuff developing on Monday around the area. So, take a look at what the WPC has for forecast rainfall on Sunday. And I'm going to guess it's going to be a lot less than what we see on Saturday. And yeah, so again, we saw that rain in the morning and a lot of the guidance across kind of the northern Midlands into North Carolina. But not much down, less than 1/4 of an inch across the Midlands and the CSRA. And then, yeah, Monday is going to be the interesting one where it's going to be more scattered, isolated, and there could be some possible thunderstorms that pop up. Let's take a look at a sounding real quick for that on Monday. Yeah, this is from the GFS. Let's pull one from kind of the Columbia area. Just looking here if we develop any instability or anything like that that would lead to chance for thunderstorms. So, yeah, we do develop a little bit of instability. Again, that upper low is right overhead. So we're going to have fairly steep lapse rates from 850 here to 700 millibars. Lapse rate aren't all that impressive above that, but it is enough, with surface temperatures getting into the low 70s and decent low-level moisture still. We do develop a little bit of instability, so could be some popcorny, isolated stuff on Monday. And, yeah, so not the most pleasant weekend, but Sunday might not be all that bad. Fortunately, won't be a total washout the whole weekend, but Saturday is definitely going to be the problem day as we get this coastal low that moves on shore and dumps, 1 to 3 inches of rain across most of our area. So, anyway, again, this is Matt here from the National Weather Service in Columbia. If you have any questions, feel free to give us a call, ask us on social media or anything like that, and try to stay dry tomorrow.